The workshop smelled of memory. It was a symphony of scents, the sharp, clean perfume of spruce, the deep, earthy musk of maple, and the sweet, resinous tang of varnish. Before we dive into the story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. For Elara, it was the only church she had ever known. Here, with her chisels and planes, she transformed dead wood into living vessels of sound. Her hands, though slender, were strong and sure, calloused from a lifetime of devotion to her craft. Her greatest creation was not a cello or a violin, but the smile on her younger brother's face. Liam was all light and laughter, a melody in human form. He was the one who played the instruments she made, his fingers dancing across the strings, filling their small home with a joy so pure it felt sacred. He would often say, his voice bright with youth, Elara, you don't just make violins. You build souls for them to sing with. That was before the sky fell. It happened on a Tuesday. Liam had taken a summer job at a downtown construction site to save for a new bow. It was a project by Valerius Corp., a monument of steel and glass that promised to scrape the heavens. Its owner, Silas Valerius, was a man carved from ambition and apathy. His face was plastered across magazines, a portrait of success, his eyes holding the cold, flat sheen of polished granite. The call came in the afternoon, a structural failure, a pancake collapse, a list of names. Liam S. was among them. Grief was not a gentle wave for Elara. It was a physical assault. It was a thief that stole the air from her lungs, the color from the world, the music from her soul. She attended the sterile press conferences where Silas Valerius, flanked by lawyers, offered hollow condolences and promised a thorough investigation. He spoke of unforeseen geological stresses, of tragic but unavoidable accidents. Weeks turned into months. The official report was a masterpiece of corporate fiction. It blamed a subcontractor, a small firm that conveniently declared bankruptcy. It exonerated Valerius Corp. Completely. Elara knew it was a lie. She had seen the hushed-up reports from disgruntled engineers online, the whispers of cut corners, of substandard materials, of safety inspections pencil-whipped into compliance. Valerius had built his monument on a foundation of greed, and her brother had been buried under it. The world moved on. The news cycle spun. Another tower was planned, but Elara did not move on. She remained in the wreckage, in the silence of her workshop where Liam's last violin lay in its case like a tiny coffin. The grief inside her began to curdle. It cooled, hardened, and sharpened into something new. It was a single, perfect, ice-cold note of resolve, revenge. The word itself felt alien on her tongue, a discordant sound in the harmony of her life. But it was the only word that made sense. She could not bring Liam back, but she could make Silas Valerius understand the cost of a soul. A violent act was too simple, too crude. Valerius was a man who lived and died by his image, his legacy. He collected beautiful, priceless things to prove his worth. He built towers to immortalize his name. She would not destroy the man. She would dismantle the myth. She would use her own art, the very craft she had shared with Liam, as her weapon. The first few years were a blur of transformation. Elara vanished. She sold her home, packed her tools, and became a ghost in her own life. She traveled, studying under old masters in forgotten European towns. She learned more than just woodworking. She studied architecture, acoustics, the physics of resonance. She read every article ever written about Silas Valerius, learning his tastes, his habits, his vanities. He was a collector of the unique, the unparalleled. He craved to possess things no one else could. She reemerged under a new name, Anya, a mysterious luthier of prodigious, almost supernatural talent. Her instruments were spoken of in hushed, reverent tones among the world's elite musicians. They were not just instruments, they were experiences. Each one was unique, with a tone so rich and complex it was said to echo the emotions of the player. Anya was an enigma. She took few commissions and her waiting list was a decade long. She was, in short, exactly the kind of artist Silas Valerius would ache to conquer. Her master plan began with a pilgrimage. Under the cloak of darkness, she returned to the city that had broken her. The site of the collapse was now a sterile, manicured park with a small, tasteful plaque that mentioned a tragic accident but named no names. Nearby, a new Valerius tower was rising, grander and more audacious than the last. It was called the Ethelgard, a name that dripped with self-importance. For several nights, Elara, disguised as a vagrant, sifted through the soil at the edge of the park. It was a desecration and a prayer. Her fingers, which knew the soul of wood, searched for a different kind of material. She found it, a handful of splintered, petrified wooden beams overlooked in the cleanup. They were remnants of the cheap, substandard support structures that had failed. They were soaked in rain, soil, and the echoes of her brother's final moments. She smuggled the wood back to her new workshop, a secluded place in the mountains where the only sound was the wind. She laid the fragments on her workbench. They were ugly, scarred, and dead. She wept over them, her tears the first she had shed in years. They were not tears of sorrow, but of a terrible, holy purpose. This dead wood would sing again. It would sing a song of truth. For more than a year, she worked. She treated the wood, purifying it with fire and water, filling its cracks with a special resin mixed with her own blood. It was a dark baptism. She integrated these scarred pieces into the heart of a new instrument, a grand cello. She laminated them, hid them, wove them into the internal structure, a cancer in the core. The rest of the cello was crafted from the most exquisite flamed maple and resonant spruce, beautiful and perfect on the outside. A perfect lie. She engineered the instrument with a terrifying precision. She calculated the resonant frequency of the salvaged wood. She designed the cello's body to act as a focusing chamber. Her study of acoustics and engineering had led her to a wild, audacious theory. A specific note, played with a specific force and duration, would generate a unique, ultra-low frequency. A sound wave that, if amplified correctly in a hall with the right properties, could theoretically create a sympathetic vibration in a specific type of compromised material. Material like, for instance, the new crystalline glass panels used in the facade of the Ethelgard Tower, which she had learned from a disgruntled supplier, were a cheaper, untested variant Valerius had sourced to cut costs yet again. She named the cello the Elegy. When it was finished, she let the news of its existence leak out through a trusted dealer. A cello made by Anya, rumored to be her masterpiece, a once-in-a-lifetime creation. As she had predicted, the great whale took the bait. An assistant of Silas Valerius contacted her. Mr. Valerius was interested. He was a patron of the arts. He wished to acquire the Elegy. Elara, as Anya, was cool and distant. She was not interested in selling. The instrument was personal. This, of course, only inflamed his desire. He doubled his offer. He tripled it. He demanded a meeting. They met in his office on the top floor of his current tower. It was a sterile expanse of chrome and glass, overlooking the city like a king's throne room. Silas Valerius was older than in the magazines, but his arrogance was timeless. He was a man who had never been told no. He appraised her as he would a piece of furniture. "They say your work is divine, Anya. I am the city's foremost collector of divinity." Elara kept her face a mask of placid artistry, her heart a frozen stone in her chest. Looking at him, she felt nothing but a vast, cold emptiness. The fire of her rage had been banked, channeled into the singular purpose of the instrument that now sat between them. "It is not for sale," she said, her voice calm and even. "But it is meant to be played, not owned." She proposed an arrangement, one she knew his ego could not resist. The Ethelgard Tower was due to be unveiled in a few months at a lavish charity gala. It was to be the crowning achievement of his career. She would allow the Elegy to be played for the first time at that gala by a world-renowned cellist of his choosing. It would be a loan, a gift of art to the city in honor of his new creation. After the performance, she would take it back. He stared at her, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. He saw it as a negotiation, a game. He believed that once the cello was associated with his triumph, she would be forced to sell. He agreed. "An excellent idea. My triumph heralded by yours." The night of the gala was a spectacle of obscene wealth. The ballroom on the 50th floor of the Ethelgard was a glittering cage of high society. Through panoramic windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, the city lights sprawled below like a carpet of fallen stars. Elara was there, a quiet shadow in a simple black dress, her face veiled by the anonymity she had so carefully constructed. She watched Silas Valerius preen and pontificate, accepting praise for his vision, his genius. He was a god in his own pantheon. Her stomach was a knot of ice and fire. This was it. Years of her life, all of her pain and all of her skill, had been distilled into a single moment. She had briefed a trusted journalist just an hour before, giving him the details of the cello's wood, the story of its origin, and the name of the subcontractor Valerius had ruined. The story was ready. It just needed its final, explosive punctuation mark. The lights dimmed. A spotlight found the stage. The celebrated cellist, a man named Julian Croft, walked out and sat with the Elegy. He bowed to the audience, to Valerius, who sat in the front row, beaming like a proud father. The cello gleamed under the lights, its surface a flawless mirror of amber and gold. It looked perfect. The music began. It was a haunting, melancholic piece one Croft himself had composed for the occasion. The cello's voice filled the hall. It was beautiful. So painfully, achingly beautiful. It sang of loss, of sorrow, of a deep and abiding grief. Elara closed her eyes. For a moment she was not Anya the Avenger, but Elara the sister, and she could hear Liam's laughter in the notes. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. The piece moved towards its climax. The music swelled, growing in power and intensity. Croft's body rocked with the force of his playing. His bow dug into the strings, his face a mask of passionate exertion. Elara's eyes snapped open. Her gaze fixed not on the stage, but on the vast window overlooking the city. The final movement arrived. It was a series of powerful, deep chords, culminating in one single, sustained note. The note, G-sharp, the frequency. Croft drew his bow across the strings one last time, pouring all of his strength into it. The note erupted from the cello. It was a sound of profound, earth-shattering finality. It was not just a sound to be heard, but to be felt. It vibrated through the floor, through the chairs, through the very bones of the audience. For a split second, there was just the pure, resonant power of that note hanging in the air. And then another sound. It started as a high-pitched ping, almost imperceptible, like a single grain of sand striking a pane of glass. Then another, and another. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Every head turned towards the massive, floor-to-ceiling window. There, in the center of the vast sheet of glass, a tiny, star-like fracture had appeared. As the cello's note continued to hold, to vibrate, the star began to grow. Tiny, shimmering lines shot out from it, racing across the glass like veins of ice. A web of cracks spread across the window, catching the light of the ballroom, sparkling like a diamond necklace of destruction. The sound grew louder, a chorus of sharp, cracking noises, a sound Elara knew intimately. It was the sound of something strong and proud being broken from the inside out. Panic began to bloom. People stood up, pointing, shouting. The cellist, startled, finally lifted his bow. The note died, but the damage was done. The great window, the eye of the Ethelgard, was now a shattered mosaic. It held, but it was ruined. A symbol of catastrophic, visible failure. In the ensuing chaos, Elara's eyes found Silas Valerius. He was on his feet, his face ashen. He was not looking at the frantic guests or the security team rushing in. He was staring at the fractured window, and then his gaze swung to the cello on the stage, and then finally, his eyes found hers across the crowded room. In that moment, the mask of Anya fell away, and he saw her. He saw the girl from the news reports all those years ago, the sister of the boy who died. He saw the source of the wood. He saw the perfect, poetic justice of it all. His legacy, his monument to himself, had been scarred by an instrument built from the remnants of his sin. His empire was not brought down by a bomb, but by a song. The expression on his face was not anger or confusion. It was pure, abject terror. The terror of a man who believed he was untouchable, realizing he had been undone. His reputation would not survive this. The journalist's story would break in the morning. The symbolism was too potent, too perfect. The investigations would be reopened. His cheap, compromised materials would be exposed. He was finished. Elara held his gaze for a long moment, and she felt nothing. The burning satisfaction she had expected was not there. There was no elation, no joy. There was only a vast, quiet emptiness. The cold note of revenge had been played, and now only silence remained. She turned and walked away, slipping out of the ballroom unnoticed in the pandemonium. She did not look back. A few seasons later, Elara lived in a small cottage by the sea. The salt-laced wind was a constant, cleansing presence. The news of Silas Valerius's downfall had been swift and total. His company was buried in lawsuits and federal investigations. The Ethelgard Tower stood as a monument to his disgrace, its shattered window a permanent scar on the skyline. He was a broken man, a ghost in his own ruined life. Elara did not follow the news. She did not need to. Her work was done. In her new workshop, which smelled only of sea air and cedar, she did not build instruments. She repaired them. Old, broken things sent to her from small-town orchestras and school children. One evening, as the sun bled into the ocean, she opened a small, worn case. Inside was Liam's first violin, the one she had made for him when he was just a boy. It was simple, unadorned, and full of memories. Her hands, which had spent years as instruments of a cold and calculated vengeance, trembled as she lifted it. She placed it under her chin. Her fingers felt clumsy and alien on the fingerboard. She picked up the bow. For so long, her craft had been yoked to hatred. She did not know if she could create beauty for its own sake anymore. She drew the bow across the strings. The sound that came out was fragile, hesitant, a faltering, imperfect note. It was not a song of triumph or of sorrow. It was not an elegy. It was just a sound, a beginning. She played another note, then another. A simple, quiet melody began to form, weaving itself into the sound of the ocean waves outside. It was the first song she had played for herself in almost a decade. And as the music filled the small room, Elara closed her eyes, and for the first time since the sky had fallen, she felt the faint, fragile stirring of her own soul beginning to sing again. The revenge was complete, but the healing, she now understood, was a composition all its own.